finding in this day and age of so much change, so much more transparency, the difference between the old and the new?
I think, I've worked with Josh a lot in the past. I think what Josh says is something that most journalists will say. You want to tell a story, you want to connect on a real level. We don't want gimmicks, we don't want to say this is the best ever, the first ever. But I think it's important from the PR side to remember that everybody wants something here. Your company wants amazing coverage. The journalist wants a scoop, wants a special story, wants a way to tell the story that's going to be unique to them. You have to kind of understand all of your audiences as a PR person. We want to make our clients happy, but we also have to protect our journalists. If the client says, hey, I really want to be in TechCrunch this week, or I really want to be in Wall Street Journal, this story should be in Wall Street Journal, we kind of have to know when to say no to our clients, or when to say, this isn't the right time for that journalist. And if we don't say no, then I'm going to send Josh an asinine pitch. I'm going to send him a pitch that is not right for him, and he's going to write me off, and I'm going to get the thumbs down. So it really is having that leverage, or having that real, open, transparent conversation with your client that leads to transparency in PR, I think, in a lot of ways. If your client, you just say, yes, we're going to get you there. Yes, we think that's going to be a great target for you. You should be on the Ellen show within a month. If we don't set expectations in the right way, our clients are going to expect those things that we sold them on to come true. So we have to be really transparent at the beginning and say, hey, we've got to build up to that story. And in that way, we protect the journalists that we work with. So there's many times where a client will say, we really want to be in this publication written by Josh Gonsi. We want to be in TechCrunch. We want Josh to cover this. I'll say, you're not going to get it. We're not going to even try. Because that will damage our relationships with our journalists. And so really making sure that we take care of not only our clients, but take care of the journalists at the same time. I think that's where it starts.
So I can give an analogy to business development, given that's my background. And it's sort of the same thing. I think of PR as just business development with journalists. And no partnership is a good partnership if it's not mutually beneficial. So it's really important to understand your client, help them craft their message and their pitch in a way that's appropriate for the people that you're trying to build relationships with that are the most important people in the business, which are the journalists, because they're the ones that end up helping make your clients happy. And making sure that you're also protecting those relationships, a lot like Elliot is saying. I don't want to burn my bridge with Josh because I sent him terrible pitches. I want to make sure that I do my work with my client that's actually so important, especially when we're talking about the tech world and startups who are terrible at telling their own story. They need so much help with their messaging, and that process is actually super important, and it should take a lot of time. It's not just about trying to funnel as many pitches to many different journalists to do like a spray and pray strategy. It's really important to also realize that you're in the business of relationship building.
What's the most important relationship that you've cultivated along the way? And it doesn't have to be a name, it doesn't have to be, but yeah, does one stand out?
I mean, not sucking up to any of my panelists, but I think it has been my relationship with TechCrunch. Whether it's my agency is based in New York City, and we have relationships with TechCrunch in New York City. We have relationships with TechCrunch here in San Francisco. There are many other startup publications. There are many publications that cover funding. I still do see TechCrunch as being one of the most important in the industry, and still leading the conversation in many ways. So even though we cover consumer tech, and a lot of our clients, some of our biggest hits that do the most for our clients are not in TechCrunch. They're in, they're on TV, or they're in InStyle magazine. But I still do think that relationship is probably the most important that I've cultivated along the way.
And when you have someone new, whether it's a new client, new business, or someone new in your office pitching, I deal a lot of times with very junior pitchers. How do you tell them? How do you teach them how to deal with folks like Don?
First of all, I tell them, leave that to me. Leave Josh to me, that's my contact. But no, I tell them to build their own. Try to lead by example. So, what is my relationship like with Jordan Crook? You see us at events together, you see us hanging out. What am I doing differently? I'm connecting with her on a real level. It's not that I'm just trying to sell something, and it's not that I'm a yes man to everything that she says. She really wants me to watch Veep, this show on HBO, and I'm not a big fan of Julia Dreyfus. And I'm going to say that. I think this strategic dissent is really important. If you don't actually disagree with something that a journalist says, then you need to find a reason to disagree, because you don't want to be a yes man. You don't want to be someone that they think is just going to agree with everything that they say. Creating those real relationships. So if you can't create a real relationship, then at least figure out how to fake it.
And this is for anyone here. That's fake until you make it. I love it. So for any of the panelists, Fallon, you touched on no partnership is really good without that sort of development, in business development in general. And that really works both ways. The best relationships that we journalists have with companies is through people that we like, we trust, they're our friends. If you could impart one bit of advice that you haven't already to this group of folks sitting in the room, what would it be?
I think building trust is the most important thing, and I've worked with a lot of different companies, everything from a company like a Dropbox to a small early stage startup, and they have a lot of distrust with the PR industry in general, because they're being sort of misled and not really educated in how telling their story well, messaging themselves, and targeting the right outlets to tell their story and to reach their customers. Or customers that they think they're targeting, and they've just been burned so many times and charged those big rates and not really gotten an ROI. And when you're an early stage startup or even a bigger company, what you care about is having measurable results, or at least feeling like you can really trust the people that are representing you to the media in a way that isn't going to do nothing for your business and just you're giving money away, or is going to actually benefit you, and once you end working together or whatever, you're able to really understand how you benefited from the relationship, but also how the other side might have benefited too.
How can you teach someone who's never worked in a newsroom what these guys are going through? And then the same for you when you're dealing with these companies and the different PR agencies. How do you sort of bridge that gap?
These guys are getting, sometimes I'll bolster it. People are getting 1,000 pitches a day, I'll tell my employees. How are you going to stand out from the pack? It's not going to be always based on the client. It's not always going to be based on your subject line. It's got to be based on that real relationship. So I'd say, throwing a fake number out there, 80% of my pitches that go through and turn into stories, or my team's pitches that turn into stories, are people that they have built prior relationships with. So it comes back to that prior relationship.
Yeah, I think one really important relationship to be building for PR agents is to think about, it's not just about picking the best journalist or picking some journalists or whoever will cover you. You want to foster a relationship with journalists who love to be journalists. Because a lot of people view this profession as a jumping off point to do other things. And the worst thing that can happen to you is you spend, a year or 6 months building a relationship with someone, and then they leave the industry entirely, and suddenly you're stuck at that ground, you're stuck at the bottom rung again.
And they're your competitor now.
Yeah.
A lot of these.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. And so, if you can find people who are specifically really interested in the vertical that your business is in, even if they're at a smaller publication, if you can turn them into a true ally, someone who really believes in your company, and they're someone who you think is going to be in the business for a while, I'm not afraid to tell people, I plan to be in journalism for 5 more years minimum, and I kind of want to do it for my entire life. And when I tell people that, it makes them a lot more willing to trust me, because it means that I can't afford to just burn them for a quick scoop and a bonus and be out the door. They know that I have to be in this industry for a lifetime, and I can't afford to burn my bridges. And so I think because of that, you also need to understand that some of these, some journalists are going to write negative things about you. And when that happens, there's 2 ways to take it. You can cut them off and basically turn them into an actual enemy to your company, or you can try to sway them again in the future. And so for instance, one company I was covering called Meraki, they did a big internal briefing where they told all of their personnel all their confidential financial details, including that they had just raised a secret $40 million round to destroy their competitors. Somebody came along and just told me all this information right away. I published a big story on it. It was a big scoop. And they were on a witch hunt trying to figure out who it was that told me, and they were really mad about the whole thing. But somehow, somewhere along the way, they came around and they realized that in fact that boosted their star. Suddenly they were a much more important company because everyone was like, wow, they've got these big secret plans. We didn't think much of them. And a few months later, they got acquired by Cisco for over $1 billion. And they called me and they're like, hey, this is about to drop in a half hour. You can have it right now. And it was amazing seeing them understand that sometimes what you think is bad for you at first isn't always bad, and you need to let it play out over time.
Thanks. I agree with everything you said. But one thing I would just add to, since I am the lifer, look ahead, Josh, you could be like me, poor bastard. No,
you only have 8 years on me, though.
But anyway, so I would just say that, you know, part of this whole thing is, as it was said about the relationships do help the pitch get through. But one of the reasons those relationships exist to begin with is because you come to know certain people as people who don't take dumb clients. They don't pitch dumb stories. You know, I'm not going to go into the names of certain firms around town, but there's a few that have been, in my view, successful because they turn down lots of business. There's all kinds of companies they would not work with for, you know, sometimes technical reasons, sometimes relationship reasons, sometimes conflict, inter-client conflict reasons. But, you know, and you can't, I realize this is life, you can't always be selective about those things, but the more judicious you are about what clients you pick, what you pitch, to whom you pitch it, this is the kind of thing that helps build those relationships we were starting.
We only have a few more minutes before the next panel comes up, so I want to make sure that we get to some of your questions. I know you have questions for this panel.
If you don't, we're going to ask you questions.
If you don't, I have several more. Yeah.
Cool. So Josh, you already called mine. You were talking about how you want to be pitched the problem. In Nuri Ayal's book, fellow TechCrunch reporter, he talks about how they're painkillers and vitamins, and some companies start as vitamins, nice to have that people don't know. How do you judge those cases?
I mean, like companies that aren't really solving a problem, but are just sort of nice to have?
They aren't painkillers, so they aren't painkillers. So they're solving a problem that users don't know.
There's always a problem to solve. It's just a matter of framing. It's like just because it makes someone's life better, opposed to from like good to better, opposed to from bad to okay, that doesn't mean it's not a problem. It's like that can mean it's like democratizing an important piece of technology that's going to allow for more creative expression. It can mean that, you know, yeah, this business was doing this all right before, but now they're going to be able to do it. They're going to be able to take this really, you know, annoying part of their business, you know, it's not a big deal, but it's like this annoying little thing, they don't have to worry about it anymore, so they can focus on what they're really great at, what's truly important to them. So I think, like, those are a few ways that I think you can try to reframe the solution as having a real problem that it's solving. Is, you know, maybe it's not that it's solving a specific problem, but it's allowing you to spend more time doing things that you do care about as a business or a merchant or whatever.
And Josh, what I think you're talking about too is like the framing of the problem as well. If you work with the right PR agency, or you know how to tell your story right in the first place, you're going to be presenting it to you with the background knowledge of, okay, Josh gets the context here. Josh knows the context, he knows the problem, or he's invested or has written about the space before. We kind of want to make sure, with every journalist, if I pitch the New York Daily News, for example, lady is 60 years old, she does not understand how to use an app, and I have to sit there and actually go to her office and walk her through the app every single time. The way that she has context is very different than the way we have context. So it is kind of making sure that we get that context right for each person.
Yeah, and I would add to that the audience, you know, you've got TechCrunch, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, they're very different audiences.
Right.
And yet we're often pitched the exact same story. So it feels to me a lot in modern journalism that oftentimes we are only trying to be each other versus trying to tell the best story. How do you stay firm to that and still sort of meeting all of your expectations? And that goes both sides, and we do have to wrap up, so that'll be kind of final thoughts there, is how do you hold true to this? I gotta keep coming back to storytelling, because I think that is so often forgotten these days.
I think
how do you stay true to that?
What Don said, pick the right clients. Back to what Josh says, tell the right story to the right person. And I think for us, as a PR agency, I think the number one thing that we can do to bring transparency back into the PR world is to not lie to our clients. Start with complete truth to our clients. This person doesn't like this story because your website sucks. It's not sexy enough. We're not going to get through to them. It looks like Web 1.0. Being really transparent with our clients leads to transparency with the journalists. I think it starts with the PR firm in many ways.
For me, it's like, I want the PR agent and the company to know why they're trying to get press in the first place. And there's three major reasons that you do that, at least in my space. One is for fundraising. You want to make more investors aware of you and want to lure them into investing in you. It's for recruiting. You want more people to know about your company so they want to go and work there. And three, it's for product growth. You want more people to actually use your products. And there's those different pitches, each of those different purposes have a very different pitch, and they come at a very different time. And so a lot of times I see companies just sort of willy-nilly trying to get press when they don't actually have one of those objectives in mind, and they burn their opportunity so that later when they really need that press, when it's like coming down to the wire, they're running out of runway and they really need to raise money, they really need some more extra people to throw in some cash, like that's when they needed to do their story, not like in the middle of their fundraising cycle when they had plenty of money and they didn't have a new product that was great to pitch and they weren't actually hiring that many people and they just do it at the completely wrong time. So remember that you sort of like have to build up until people like, you have to build up your cred with a journalist and then sort of blow it all when it's the right time.
I wish my clients were here. You say that.
Somebody recorded that, somebody wrote that down, right?
I'll just add, we're sort of talking here in sort of, you might say kind of good times. There's a lot of money sloshing around, a lot of funding, lots of things. Bad times will come back. And remember now how you're behaving, and things could turn around. You could be in a position now where every journalist in the world is knocking on your door to get the scoop. Tomorrow, it could be just the reverse when you're desperate. So just, treat people the way you'd want to be treated. This is kind of corny, but I went through a lot of people who I couldn't get off my phone in the first bubble, and then it was crashed, and then you couldn't get them on the phone, and it's just like, all this comes back to you. Your reputation is very important, and you have a personal brand to build, so burnish it.
And thank you all so much for taking the time to do this. We understand.